Are you ready?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope. This is the newsletter, the podcast arm of our newsletter here at St. John Sam Prairie, the Parishscope. I am Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Doremus. I'm the Creative Worship Director at Our Savior Lutheran.
All right. Well, today is a special day.
Yes.
We're gonna talk about Pope stuff.
Yeah,
That's right.
Pope stuff.
We're gonna talk about Pope stuff. So the funeral was on Saturday. Did you watch any of it?
I have not seen any of it. No,
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't either. I didn't either. I mean, obviously there was like news stories like Trump did this or this was said or this cardinal was there, but I honestly did not really watch any of the funeral. I don't really feel bad about that, but it's just one of those things. Like it is a very kind of like we were talking about last week. It's like it is a very historic thing, and yet I kind of will be honest. I had other things to do. I was busy.
Yeah.
And it's just not that important in terms of in terms of impacting me. Like, again, if I was Catholic, I think I'd probably be a lot more into it, but I'm just not. So,
yeah.
So anyway, but I know a lot of people have a lot of questions and, and it was really fascinating. So like, last week we kind of started talking about this and I said, hey, let's just push this off. Let's get it till next week. And we actually had one of our listeners actually sent me a link to a live stream, like kind of a live cast of this basically canon law lawyer who was presenting in front of a Catholic college, and he was kind of explaining the whole shebang. Anyway, so she sent me this link, and I'll be honest, it was fascinating. Like, I mean, I knew a little, and I knew I had to study. Like, this is one of those times whenever I actually had to study because I just don't know enough about it. I know just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to really know everything. And you're going to see that. Like, as we kind of talk about stuff, you're going to realize I don't know the technical titles. I don't know the fancy phrases or even a lot of the Latin. So, and that comes through a lot, but it was just really fascinating to kind of listen to that guy kind of talk about it and really get him to really listen to him and pay attention. I have to admit, one of the things I was hoping to do tonight that we are not going to have time for one, I just don't think we're going to have time for it, but also I did not find a sermon from Pope Francis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that is unfortunate. I was kind of hoping to kind of find one, but I just didn't find one. And again, I didn't look real hard or anything. It was just more like I got caught up in a lot of these other things that I was doing. So,
yeah.
So anyway, so without further ado, let's actually talk about this. So first we're going to start off with, what is a pope? Right? What we need to figure out what a pope is. Obviously, if you're Lutheran, you don't have a pope. Now we do have a president. We have a president of our synod. Our main synod offices are in Missouri, as you might guess, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So our main offices are in fact in Missouri. And currently, the president of our synod is a man by the name of Reverend Dr. Matthew Harrison, and so that's him. He's got a rockin' mustache, like one of those like old Western style ones, like big and just huge. So there's that. But he's not our pope. He's not our pope. And so, what's the difference? What is the difference between a pope and, say, a president? Well, in fact, to be fair, there's actually quite a bit of difference. I mean, even at the core of it, there's just a huge core difference. Now, I will say at the very start that, a pope over the years and through tradition has gained a lot more power than what they had originally. The word pope, did I just say perp? I said
perp. Yeah, the perpetrator.
The perpetrator. Yeah, no. The pope comes from this phrase that means Papa, our Father. and he's kind of considered like the vicar, like he is the vicar as in the substitute. Jesus ascended into heaven, and so now kind of this man who stands at the head of the church, and he kind of stands as the kind of the governing authority. Now, anything he does by, dare I say, papal decree, can ultimately be pushed into doctrine. In that regard, they consider him infallible, but it's important you got to distinguish that. They are not saying he is a sinless being. They are not saying that he is himself infallible. The basic argument kind of goes like this: if God is leading the church, and God has allowed us through these, dare I say, human means, but allowed us to establish this order, then God will not allow us through human decree to basically muddy the church, defile the church. God will see it through. And so they believe that whenever they do something through papal decree, that in fact is what the Pope is doing. Is he is simply enacting God's will to the people. Now, most of the time, that does not mean like massive doctrinal changes. A lot of times, it simply means that the Catholic Church is going to recognize certain doctrines that have been around for a long, 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 long time. So, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on that, because again, that's not really our focus tonight. But that is kind of one of those things that we sometimes muddy the water with. We say, well, they just believe the Pope is infallible. Well, not necessarily. You can disagree with the Pope, you can not like the Pope, but when it comes into the papal decrees, in terms of the doctrine of the church, then he's kind of, it's like his word is the last word, so to speak. All right. So that's kind of what a pope is. Now, a pope,
Okay.
in the ancient of days, basically we had these two massive churches. One was in Antioch and the other one was in Alexandria. And the two churches, in a sense, represented, like, dare I say, that the two sides of Christianity. And what I mean by that is more like Western thought and Eastern thought. And eventually, right around 1000 AD, actually it's about like 1059, there was a great schism where the East and the West, basically the two leaders of those two churches basically excommunicated each other.
Wow.
But the thing of it is that those leaders of those churches were considered the top bishops, or to put it another way, they were considered kind of the popes.
Right. Yeah, because
So,
I mean, there is something. I mean, I don't know much about the Catholic Church, but I do know there's something about the fact that there were two popes at one point.
well, and again, there's something else too, and that's like, I forget what they call that, but where like they captured a pope or they had their own pope. There's some historical things where like there's been a couple popes at the same time, and it's usually over a schism and fighting. This isn't quite the same as that. And again, these were kind of the bishops at the time, and they were fighting for power to some degree. They were fighting over some doctrine, and they both kind of excommunicated each other. Again, the history of this is it gets really deep in the weeds really quick, and quite frankly, I don't want to misspeak, is to be blunt about it, because I haven't. Again, I've done a little bit of study, but it wasn't about that, unfortunately.
Right.
So I won't go too deep into the weeds on that one. But basically, what it comes down to is the Pope, in essence, was the leader of kind of the biggest and most influential church, and kind of sat, in a sense, at the head of Christendom at that point. And that's kind of at least some of that history that kind of goes into it. And by the way, the popes weren't always like they are today. What was it? I think it's Saint Gregory the Great actually had a full army like under him, and actually did some stuff. Some of the popes led crusades, and again, we look at that and go, wow, that's crazy. Why would anybody do that? But we fail to realize sometimes that it was just a different time, and popes were viewed and looked at differently than to some degree they are today. So that's, again, kind of just going down that rabbit trail. Like, that's what a pope is. And I think we also need to understand what canon law is. Canon law, so the word canon, by the way, it's a Latin phrase that means a straight rod. And think of it like the same way we would think of a ruler,
Hmm.
like, 12 inches is a foot. And, the straight rod was used as a measuring pole. And
Ah,
that was kind of the point. Like the rules, the laws are a way to measure things out, and if you need to, if you can look at a law that way, then you can kind of begin to understand this. Like, even whenever you think of like driving down the road, what is a speed limit? Well, it is a way for you to measure whether or not you are going too fast or too slow.
right.
So it's giving you this limit, this measure, this element. And so canon law kind of fits into that category. Canon law is the way the Catholic Church in its structure organizes itself. And the canon law is in fact quite ancient. The first like written form of it was in the 1200s, and they've been adjusting it and adding to it and so on and so forth ever since then. It is considered the longest running um, example of a Western legal system. So it is ancient, it is old, and it is like the longest continuing. Now, whether or not they had it before that, it just wasn't written, or we don't have any of it, that I'm not going to get into. But that's what canon law is. So you'll hear a lot of people talking about canon law. Canon law is quite important because it's how they've structured themselves. Now, again, from our sake, we would say, well, we have a president of our synod, and then he has a council of presidents, and then there's district presidents, and then there's vice presidents and circuit visitors, and so on and so forth. That is how we have chosen to organize ourselves as the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and they use this canon law that they've developed for almost a millennia now, kind of working their way through it and kind of doing it. But it is pretty solid. It is pretty foundational. And so it's kind of what their structure that they're going to go on. And it's also going to tell them how they are to elect the new pope.
Hmm.
All right. Now, I've said my little piece there. I've jammered on for like 10 minutes. You got any thoughts?
Well, one thing I would ask is because I feel like I hear people say this a lot. So since you've kind of done some research here and you've done that, I've
Not
heard
a
people
ton, but a
say
little bit.
a little bit. Um, I've heard people kind of uh, not imply, but outwardly say, "Oh, the Catholics just believe that the only person who can talk to God is the Pope."
No,
And
that's
is
that's that's not true.
yeah.
Now, again, I will say this though: the Catholics have a very heavy-handed view of reverence. And
Hmm.
again, if you look at it in the form of reverence, I think you will begin to understand where a lot of their doctrine comes in. And we've talked about this in terms of the views of the saints and all that kind of stuff. But like, they don't necessarily believe. Um, if you can remember that old movie with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck in it, like they don't believe in Buddy Jesus.
Yeah, yeah,
They just don't. They don't believe that God is. I don't want to say like approachable. Of course, God is approachable, but they also kind of carry with them the almightiness of God. Like they have, in a sense, to some degree, I would actually argue they actually have a better grasp of the almightiness of God, like the power and the in essence the bigness of God. And so they're very reverential. And most Catholics are taught how to be reverential. And it's one of those things where I do think that they take it too far, but at the same time, I think they can argue that maybe we have gone too light with it. You
yeah,
know, we have a tendency to see Jesus like hanging out with us and sitting next to us and whatever, and what however you want to be it, like Jesus in our view is seems to always be accepting of whatever. And it's like,
yeah,
read the Bible, that's not Jesus. Like,
yeah,
I'm not saying you couldn't sit on a bench and talk to Jesus, but Jesus is not just going to look at your sin and go, it's all good. Like, no.
yeah. Yeah.
He's not going to do that. That's not the way he is. And so, I think you need a healthy balance of both. Um, I do think that they have a tendency to overdo that reverential aspect. But, I'll be honest, even before this, as I was reading some of the things on some Catholic web pages, they're firm believers that Jesus is in fact the great mediator between God and man. And so you can definitely still pray to Jesus. Now, there is something to be said about you know, God's very vicar, his very substitute here on earth, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so again, the joke has some credibility in that there are certainly some times where it certainly seems that way, and maybe even to some degree some Catholics might believe that, but at least from their official pages, I don't get that.
Mm-hmm.
So I
That's
don't.
just one of those things I remember growing up hearing people say, you know, and
Oh
so
yeah,
and I as I get older, I'm like, I don't think that's what they believe, but I
yeah.
just thought I'd at least throw it out there because yeah, I've heard people say statements like that in the past.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and that's even like the joke, and I'm sure this joke goes with basically any Protestant faith. But the joke is that a guy goes up to a friend who's Catholic, and he says, "Hey, can you pray to Jesus for me?" And the friend goes, "Oh, I can't pray to Jesus, not directly. You're gonna have to talk to the priest." And the priest says, "Oh, I can't do that. You're gonna have to go talk to the monk, or whatever."
Yeah, yeah.
And the guy goes to the monk, and then he goes, "Oh, you can't do that. You're gonna go talk to the Pope." And so he goes talk to the Pope, and the Pope says, "Yeah, I can do that for you." And finally, the guy goes, "Oh, thank goodness you're Lutheran too," and it's like, you know, and that's kind of the joke. Now, again, I'm sure you can import Baptist or
Yeah,
Presbyterian,
yeah.
but the joke still, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and I besides that, I don't, uh it is very interesting to me because I think there's such a mysticism for especially for people who aren't Catholic
Yeah,
about the Vatican and the cardinals and
yeah.
how because it seems very political
Oh
from
yeah,
the
for sure.
outside, and I mean I'm sure everything kind of when you get down to it is kind of political. Um,
Yeah,
so it's that's what's so interesting is that I feel like I don't hear a lot of like when they do select a pope, I feel like I don't hear a lot of complaining about the pope. Like I wish this guy was the pope and they picked the wrong person. Like I don't hear
yeah,
that sort of talk very often. It seems like it's really really tense, and then whoever gets picked, it's just kind of like that's it.
yeah.
And it's
And
like
and,
everything's
and to
kind
be
of left.
And to be fair, there are some reasons for that, but I will also say that you just don't know enough Catholics good enough.
That's true.
Um,
That's
because
true.
I
Yeah.
remember in 2013 when Francis was elected, man, like there were some Catholics screaming bloody murder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
were
So
not happy.
yeah, maybe I just yeah, I guess I don't spend enough time with Catholics, I guess.
Oh
I
man.
I'm still working on just, getting comfortable with the Lutherans. So, I
Ah,
don't
fair
think I
enough.
could
Fair
jump
enough.
into the Catholics yet.
Well, and to be fair, I don't want you to jump into the Catholics, so it's all good. Um, And on that note, I noticed one of the things that I did promise today was to talk a little bit about why I'm not Catholic, um, which I think this is actually a great segue into that element. It not even
Yeah.
planned. We didn't even
Not even
plan this, but it just
it
worked out.
just it just works, yeah.
It just worked out. So let's first of all, we've kind of been talking a little bit about Catholicism. Let's actually
Yeah.
break it down. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of history, and then I'll also talk a little bit about theology. So first and foremost, there are two main churches that track their history all the way back to the very beginning, and that would be Catholicism and the Orthodox. And I think I've said this before in a different one of our podcasts, but I can't remember which one. And
Yeah.
it's really funny because the names that they chose were kind of humorous. Catholic in Latin literally means universal. Like, so they're saying that they are the church. Like, if
Mhm.
you want to be a Christian, you're going to be a Catholic. And then the Orthodox, that comes from two words, ortho and dox, and basically it just means right teaching. So basically one says, yeah, we're the true church, and they go, yeah, but we got the right teaching, so
Yeah.
so that's what Orthodox means, and that's what Catholic means, and that's kind of the East and the West. Again, those two heads of the two churches. There were several councils throughout the early years of the Christian church, 7 what we would call ecumenical, which means before the split, and containing bishops from basically all over the place. And then, of course, there was the Great Split. Now, both churches by this time are around, remember, they're about 1,000 years old at this point, and certain things have already started to kind of creep in on both sides, really. Um, so they're not full on like, you know, heretical or anything. It's not like that. But just in terms of politics playing a role and some other stuff playing a role, um, the church splits, and one kind of goes towards the West in Western philosophy, and the other one goes East in Eastern philosophy. And you can actually
Mhm.
see that. Eastern philosophy is very mystical. It's very it's very hidden and secret, and like you don't know what's going on. And Western is, on the other hand, like very, very intellectual. And so um that's one of the things that you really, really get whenever you look at the East and the West. And so the Western church kind of took off with people like Saint Aquinas, um and they kind of followed on the pathway of Saint Augustine. Believe it or not, if you go over to the East, Saint Augustine is not quite a big deal, even though he was like 300 AD. He's not quite the biggest deal in the world, whereas for the West Catholics, he really is. He's
Mhm.
a big, big deal, and so is Aquinas. But slowly but surely, several little corruptions began to creep up, and the Eastern churches were still kind of small. They were growing, but they not at the speed of the Western church. And the Western church really took off.
Mhm.
And within that realm, and a huge part of this, by the way, has to do with the monastics, the monks.
Yeah.
It's really funny. It's one of those things that we really don't talk about very often, but some of the biggest evangelical movements in terms of evangelism actually took place, not from well-meaning Baptists, but actually monks,
Mm.
and they really paved a lot of the ways. But again, even with, especially with Aquinas was kind of a big deal, but several people began to kind of um, basically come up with certain philosophies. They got heavy into Aristotelian philosophy and Platonism and so on and so forth. And basically, as that kind of kept going and going and going, certain things began to corrupt the church. Um, Now, again, we can talk of it. One of the things that kind of corrupted the church, and this went in waves, but it's sometimes called simony. Uh,
Mhm.
Simony is it's based off of Simon the magician, actually found in the scriptures,
Oh.
who tries to buy basically the blessing of the Lord from Peter, and Peter kind of curses him.
Mm.
So it's called simony, and simony is where you basically sell a church position.
Ah.
So yeah, you sell a church position, and that was kind of going on. Now, there were certain times whenever it was like blazing, like way out in the open, and then there were other times whenever, like the church itself actually tried to crack down on it, and and they did. It met with some success, but it became a lot more hidden.
Mm.
Um, but what you get with that is you start to get people inside the church that don't really understand the church. They're there for power, because you see it,
Right.
really, with once Constantine is the emperor in 300, the church itself starts to get more and more political power. And even to the point where there is this kind of running debate in European history, like, who was the most powerful? Was it the emperor or was it the pope? You
Yep.
know, some would say it would be the emperor who had all his armies and so on and so forth, but then the pope would go over and put the crown on his head, and it was like,
Mhm.
okay, well, Does the Pope have the right to do that? Is he so powerful? And you get this argument going back and forth. By the time the mid 1400s comes around, the church has really fallen quite a bit. They're still very, very powerful, and very, very influential, even in politics and everything else. But some of these doctrines that have popped up, and some of them were just for money.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't start that way. And I think that's an important point to note. They did not start as a grab for money, but it's amazing the way that works. Like, people will do evil things, right? You give them
Right.
something good, and people will find something evil to do with it.
Of
Even
course,
something,
yeah.
even something like an indulgence, which I know as a Lutheran we think is just heinous. Um, the reality is that started as a way to ease the mind of soldiers that were heading off into the war,
Mm.
specifically the Crusades, if I remember correctly.
Say what was that term again? What'd you say?
Indulgence.
So what? Sorry, what's an indulgence? I
Oh
don't know.
man, sometimes I forget you don't have like a Lutheran heritage.
Yeah, I don't.
You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean that to be insulting in any way.
It's
Um,
okay. I don't take it insulting, and maybe that's because I didn't grow up Lutheran, so I don't know it's an insult. You know.
oh
Uh,
my gosh. So an
but yeah,
indulgence, okay. Um, and I forget the exact date of when this started, but basically, um, a part of Catholic belief was that when you died, your soul went down to purgatory. Now,
right,
purgatory is not hell, and hell is not purgatory.
right.
Hell is where a condemned soul goes, and a soul that is saved, that is, that has faith, goes to purgatory. Purgatory comes from this Latin phrase to purge, right? You're
Mm,
purging your sin. You're in essence working off your sin.
yeah,
Okay. And this belief arose, and again, it was partially to ease the minds of a lot of these soldiers going off into war, but the point was is that, like, supposedly if you paid a little bit of money, again, at least at the time of Luther, you paid
yeah.
money. And basically, powerful people and people high up and influential with God would pray for you, so that, either your loved one could be sprung from purgatory, or if you died, somebody would pray for you to basically, alleviate your sentence,
Ah,
so that you would spend either less time or no time in purgatory.
right. And I
So
have heard of that concept before. I didn't know. So what you were talking about, though, that's specifically the money part of it.
yeah, and an indulgence was
Okay.
like a piece of paper that you could buy that it was a
Oh,
promissory.
okay. Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay.
so you would get it, and it would basically be a promise that this was going to happen, kind of thing.
Ah, okay.
They were
Gotcha.
going to get you out of purgatory, so to speak.
And eventually that got corrupted to where the church was just like,
I mean, don't get me wrong, the whole
yeah,
doctrine is a corruption. Like, even when you think of like purgatory, like,
yeah, yeah.
purgatory is very loosely based off of some apocryphal text, and that's like the main place that it comes from. And that kind of doctrine just started to creep into the church. Again, you don't really see it in a lot of the earlier church patriarchs. You do see it much later on. And
Okay.
then all of a sudden you see indulgences, and then the priests and whatnot were selling the indulgences,
Yeah.
and so they were using it to get extra money, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Little side business there.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And so Luther, and again, I'm not going to get in. This isn't a podcast about Luther. I mean, it's about Lutheran theology, but not about Luther in particular. At least not today's episode. But basically, Luther kind of revolted a little bit against that. But with that revolt, um, you know, it kind of sent shockwaves through everything.
Hmm.
Through a church that was corrupted. Now, I will say this, that over the years, they have had a lot of different, dare I say, reforms that have kind of come
Hmm.
up. The Great Vatican Council, Vatican II, and so on and so forth. They've had a lot of stuff, and they've actually solidified a lot of their doctrine, but they still haven't gotten rid of the parts that, as Lutherans, we have a tendency to disagree with the most.
Yeah.
Um,
They
And
had a
so,
council named Vatican II.
well, there was, yeah, I don't know if it was a count. Now I'm gonna have to look that up.
Or
Yeah, the Vatican
sorry,
II.
the Vatican II. I don't know why that's just humorous to me. It just I don't know. The number just makes me laugh for some reason. Just that it just seems.
Yeah, it's the
Uh,
Second Vatican Council. I
yeah.
call it the
Okay.
Vatican II,
Gotcha.
but yeah, the Second Vatican
Okay.
Council.
Sorry. I don't know why. Maybe it's just so late that I'm just like having a giggles moment here. I don't know. But anyway, go on. Sorry. So they've solidified a lot of their doctrine. You said like since
Yeah,
then.
yeah, yeah, and they actually did a lot of
Yeah.
correction. I mean, try to give credit where credit is due, but like they did, they tried to correct a lot of it. But the problem is that there were main reasons that Lutherans are kind of holdouts. See, you got to
Hmm.
understand the Lutheran Church doesn't like the fact that we are separated from our Catholic brothers and sisters in Christ. We don't like that we're separated from our Baptist or Presbyterian brothers and sisters in Christ, but really we do kind of had this yearning to unify with the church. But the problem is that we will not unify. I mean, again, look, this kind of like this kind of like you can look at it in terms of like warfare, if you will.
Yeah.
What good is a peace treaty if you agree to all the things that you went to war for? You know,
Right.
like if you're saying, hey, this country over here is killing all of our children, let's go to war, and then later you sign a peace treaty, you're not going to sign a peace treaty giving them rights to kill all your children. Like
Right.
that would be ridiculous.
Hmm.
And that's kind of the position where as Lutherans where we are at. Like
Yeah.
like we desperately and we can overlook a lot of things, but there's a few things that we just really can't. And probably the biggest one that we cannot
Yeah.
overlook is the biblical understanding of salvation and justification.
Mm.
The Catholic Church will tell you that they firmly believe that you can only be saved by grace through faith, in agreement with 1 Timothy 2. However, their understanding of grace, what it is and how it works, is wildly different than your Lutheran brothers and sisters. They look at life and grace and the grace of God like it's a big journey. Like, you're baptized into Christ Jesus. So you're baptized
Hmm.
into faith. You're a Christian now because you're baptized. And now you're on this journey. And as you do good works that God lays out in front of you, you need to continue to do those good works. And as you do, God is going to give you grace. And through that grace, you will find yourself forgiven of your sins, and you will find yourself kind of working toward a life of holiness until you die.
Hmm.
And this is kind of their plan of salvation, like the way they are understanding scriptures. Now, I don't know if you've been able to tell, but that's pretty different than the Lutheran Church.
Yeah.
Now they
Well, what?
really they really get uptight when you start saying it's works righteousness. But that, to
Mhm.
me anyway, is kind of what it is.
Right. Well, one thing, okay, so you said something that kind of sparked something for me that you said as they believe that um, doing good works as like God lays it out in front of them,
Hmm.
so something of that effect. Would I'm assuming the Catholic Church really they're pretty solid on the wording of works, like that's how they describe it, is that it's the works that you do that God puts in front of you and you.
Well, and again, I'd have to go look at the specifics. But like, so for instance, I was reading an article before I got on here, and and it was an article where they were trying to combat Lutheranism, which is part of the reason I chose to read it.
Right.
Um, but even they wanted to, in the article, they wanted to make this big distinction between what Paul was talking about when he says works, and they're
Yeah.
like, well, we're not talking about, we're talking about works of the flesh and this and that, and like so they're like trying to tease out and like make all these distinctions. And I would argue that Paul definitely does not do that. Paul is kind of
Yeah.
lumping works of the law, even obeying the law as a work. is not going to get you into heaven. And I think Galatians is pretty clear on that point. I think Romans is pretty clear on that point. But again, they're going to try to categorize and kind of work that way. And again, realize again, we have Christian brothers and sisters all over the place. We as Lutherans have disagreements with some of them. But again, their plan of salvation still works with us. Now, according to official Catholic doctrine, they still very much believe in purgatory.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that you're probably not going to succeed, right? You're going to try real hard. And as you do, you're going to fail. And as you fail, you're going to repent. And as you repent, you're going to get holier. God's going to give you some of that grace. And as you get the grace and so on and so forth, and eventually you're going to die. And you're still going to have sin, but you're a faithful Christian. And so you're going to need to purge yourself of your sin.
Well, one thing what I thought was interesting is when you said the works as God like lays it out in front of them.
Yeah.
Is in a way, I feel like, again, the wording is definitely important because it changes a lot of how you think. But we've kind of talked about this recently. We've talked about this in the last few episodes about kind of God, not kind of, but God gives you trials. Like if you pray that you want to be, have a strong marriage, God's going to test you and put you through things so that you can overcome them or choose to overcome them, which is going to make you a stronger person or give you a stronger marriage. And so when you said the things that God puts out in front of them, it's kind of like, I feel like, it's all just kind of a wording thing, but it's like, in a way, I feel like we kind of view sort of the same thing. Like God's going to put you through trials, or he's going to put stuff in front of you. And, I think like any parent, he's going to hope you do the right thing.
Yeah.
But
well, and again, I don't want to get, I guess you're right. And again, we don't want to discount, for instance, in Philippians, like it flat out says that God will place works in front of you for you to accomplish, so there are times whenever, God's going to place works in front of you. I don't want to speak against that, but again, kind of the counterpoint to that is like, well, and yes, you should definitely do that, do those good works. But there's a difference between saying, okay, God has put good works out in front of me versus somehow me managing to accomplish those works or do those works somehow earns some aspect of things.
Right. Yeah.
And again, they don't like that. They don't like the idea of me saying like earning. They would kind of rebel against that. So if you're talking to a Catholic, realize they might get up in arms about that. But in essence, breaking it down to the pure form of like philosophy and wording and everything, that's kind of what it is. Maybe you don't earn it in the realm that God gives you more good stuff, more like God gives you more good stuff than what you truly deserve. So you don't earn it in the fullness like that, but it's still kind of like you're doing this and then God is going, oh, look at that. That's good.
Yeah.
And so that's probably one of the biggest things. That right there is probably the biggest thing that makes Lutherans not Catholics.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And it's fundamental to our understanding of faith, of justification, and in salvation. Now, of course, there's a lot of other stuff in there too. They believe in 7 sacraments. The Bible does not command 7 sacraments. Purely defining sacraments, we have 2 sacraments. That is 2 promises and 2 very clear demands from Scripture, and that is the sacrament of the altar and baptism. Again, they believe in the veneration of saints. We kind of disagree with that one. We do not believe that somebody has done so good that they've earned merits up in heaven that we can then access by praying to them. So we're not going to pray to saints. And again, we need to make it clear, like the Catholics aren't worshiping the saints. I think that's a huge misunderstanding. Yeah. And I think that's the kind of misunderstanding that, like, then a Catholic, when they correct you, it might start to sound like, oh, that's actually really good. But so you got to be kind of clear on that. They're not worshiping the saints. They're praying to them so that they can hopefully either A, they're praying to them so that saint could then approach the Heavenly Father and talk on their behalf, or they're trying to access the merits that they have in their treasury that they earned here on earth during their life.
Yeah.
But either way, we just don't do that. We're not gonna we don't believe in the treasury of merits, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Which again is not biblical anyway.
Right.
And there's all kinds of other little doctrines here and there that we can kind of pick on, and honestly, some of them are pretty major. Like some of the ones that we just mentioned, and it's like, yeah, we're not gonna go down that path. But at the same time, I can honestly tell you that if they ever changed their view of salvation and justification and got rid of purgatory, you would actually probably see a lot of Lutherans like head over. But again, it would be hard to change such a thing without getting rid of all the other stuff too.
Yeah.
It's all like dependent on it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's if you
God gives you,
change that,
if
there'd
God
be a
gives you
lot.
free grace, then why do you need to pray to somebody who has merits up in heaven? You just don't.
Yeah.
So, so it kind of works against itself in its own way, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah. So there you go. And look, we're like 40 minutes into this thing, and we have yet to talk about the election of the Pope.
Yeah. It's going to be a big one. This is a big week.
Oh, it's a big week. So May 7th is the official date that they're going to start conclave.
Right.
Now conclave, and I realized everybody, like, we just jumped ship, right? We just went from like history and theology, boom, straight into the Pope election.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Dun 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 dun.
That's right. I needed a sound effect. I don't have one. Oh no, I really messed up. Anyway, I'll be honest with you. I was watching. So we watched. I sent you a TikTok.
Yeah.
This week,
Yeah.
and it was hilarious. They did up like the election of the new Pope like it was an NFL draft. It was hysterical.
They're all talking about which cardinal is going to get it, and they're like, "Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
This guy!" And they're just going off about what guy's the most qualified versus and it was pretty funny.
Yeah. So some things I learned and figured out this week as we kind of go into it is so first of all, the Pope died on Easter Sunday on April 20th. And that is actually important. Now they go through a 9-day mourning period, which means today is the official end or the last day of their day of mourning. And then after that, and the funeral was Saturday. And now then after that, they have some time to gather themselves before they enter into what's known as conclave, which is a secret sealed meeting. Now, who's invited to this meeting? And this is the first little tidbit that I learned over the last several days. Basically, what it comes down to is cardinals. Now, a cardinal is a kind of designation, almost like a rank in a sense of a particular priest, our bishop, if you will. And they've they're cardinals. I don't know how else to explain it because I haven't read a lot of canon law, and this is where my lack of knowledge comes in. But anyway, so there's cardinals all over, and they're kind of in charge of various dioceses and so on and so forth. In order to enter into the conclave, a couple things have to be met. One, they have to be under the age of 80.
Oh.
And that is from the point of time of the death of the Pope. Now, this is actually really interesting because one of the cardinals turned 80 on Saturday, the 19th.
Oh, wow.
So he didn't make it by a day. And so he will not be there. He will not be there. He missed it. He missed it by a day. But he just turned 80.
What luck.
Yeah.
Or bad luck, I should say.
Yeah. He's not going to make it to be a pope. Anyway, so that's the first thing. The second thing is you cannot have any bans on you. And there's another pope, and I'm not even going to pronounce these guys' names, but there's another pope that got into some money stuff and got in trouble. And so Pope Francis actually put a ban on him. And now just because Pope Francis died doesn't mean that ban is lifted. So he is not...
saying,
Yeah.
Are you saying a cardinal?
Yes.
Oh, you said Pope. That's what I was.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, a cardinal got into some problems.
Okay. So
Yes,
he
my
was
apologies.
banned.
Yeah.
So he's out of the running.
No, he's not out of the running. Believe it or
Oh,
not, we can get to that in a second. He's not out of the running. He's out of the conclave.
okay. So I was assuming the conclave is like the decision room where they're all together deciding
Yes.
who that. So he could still be voted in. He's just not there to talk.
Yeah. He's not there to
Oh,
cast a vote or a ballot or anything like that.
oh, okay. So if they all decided, yeah, he's pretty great, we'll pick him. He
Yeah.
could still come in. Okay, but
Well, no, not come in. He's out of the conclave.
oh, I
He
mean,
can still be
but they
elected pope.
right. But my thought is, I wonder. I mean, I don't know statistically how often this happened, but I feel like is his chances pretty slim to none
Yes.
if he's. I would assume, but
Yeah.
there's still a possibility, but
Yeah. Yeah.
probably not.
And again, this is where it gets fascinating because, like with canon law, it basically states that it is basically a Catholic male um, who is at least in a position that they could be, for instance, they could be ordained or something like that. I shouldn't say that. Basically, they are not in like some form of church discipline, if you will.
Hmm.
So basically, any Catholic male inside the Catholic Church can be elected pope.
Oh,
Yeah. The conclave is just the gathering of cardinals who cast the vote for who is going to be the next pope.
gotcha. But the Cardinals are up for the running, right?
Yeah, and it pretty much always ends up
A
being one of the
Cardinal.
cardinals.
Yeah,
But just because it always is doesn't mean it has to be. And according
gotcha.
to
Okay.
the canon law, it can actually be somebody not in the conclave.
Is there? Do you maybe you don't know the answer to this, but is there a certain level you have to be at? Like, if you're just a normal priest, like you just worked at a
I don't
one.
even think you have to be a priest.
Oh wow.
I could
So
be
they could
wrong on that. I could be wrong. But again, I was just listening to the canon lawyer guy. I don't think you necessarily have to be a priest.
just be like the next pope, Elon Musk. Here we go.
Well, I don't think Elon Musk is Catholic.
Okay, so you have to be Catholic. That's a requirement.
I think so.
I,
Now, see,
I would
now I'm
I
looking
would
it up.
assume, but I'm just going to the extreme. Okay, I'm just
Yeah. Okay. So I just looked it up again just to verify myself because now you got me questioning myself. But it flat out says, in theory, any baptized Catholic male can be elected pope.
okay. So okay, if they're Catholic, gotcha.
But current
Interesting.
law states that he must be an ordained bishop.
Okay, so they have to be a bishop.
Well, yeah,
And is
Karen.
that above? That's above a priest? I would assume.
Yeah.
Okay.
And only cardinals have been elected since the 15th century.
Oh
So,
wow.
okay.
All right,
But
boys, we gonna make some history? Or we? No, I'm just kidding. All right, sorry. I'm just in a weird place, I think, mentally tonight. So
yeah,
anyway, go ahead.
no, it's good. But I think the idea is that in theory, if you're a Catholic male and you are basically in good standing, you can hypothetically be made pope. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So anyway, but the
Okay.
conclave has basically all the various cardinals under the age of 80 at the point of the Pope's death. And I think, if I remember correctly, now in the video I watched, I think the guy said there was going to be 136. I feel like I read somewhere
Oh
that there's
wow.
only 135. So I'm not going to be solid on any of those numbers.
Wow.
So
135 Cardinals?
yeah,
Wow. Okay. Gosh, I didn't know there was that. I mean, I guess I don't have any real basis of how many there are, but yeah, that's a lot. Jeesh. And am I right that this has to be a unanimous decision?
No.
Oh no. Okay, then I'm wrong. I thought there was something where it's like they had to be unanimous, and that's why it could take so long.
Nope. They do not have to be unanimous.
Hmm.
Unanimous.
Wow, I'm learning a lot. So many things that I've heard throughout my life, little comments, and yeah, some of them it's like, yeah, that's not true. Oh, okay, it's funny. Wow. So, how do you know how long typically these last? These conclave?
So they can last, from what I understand, a maximum of like 13 days.
Wow. Yeah.
Because what happens is that basically, um, after 13 days, if they can't come to a conclusion over who should be pope, at that point they do a runoff vote.
Oh wow.
And so that they're, if they're deadlocked, they will get um, a pope. Now in the meantime, basically they're going to have a figure that's going to act kind of as hope while they're, or as pope, as hope, no, as a pope while they are in vacancy, as an empty chair. This is the sede vacante, the
Mm.
empty chair, as it is, and that's when there's no pope, and that's called a camerlingo, or the chamberlain,
Oh.
and he acts kind
Ooh.
of as a figurehead during that time, and so he's the one that kind of does a lot of these other things. um yeah, maybe a bad thing, but like he's kind of like, if you ever watch like Angels and Demons, like the Dan Brown book or movie,
Uh huh.
that's Ewan McGregor's character is the Carmelingo.
Okay.
So, so
So,
anyway,
do
um
they? I wonder, is that picked out way ahead of time? Like they know years in advance when when the Pope passes, this person's going to step in? Because I'm assuming they got to step in right away.
yes. um Let me, I don't know. I don't know. I
It's
wish I could tell
interesting.
you I knew the answer to that. I think somewhere in my reading and listening I heard it, but I couldn't tell you. I know,
Yeah.
I'm just full of non-answers, aren't I?
Well, I
Um,
mean, what you're Lutheran or something?
I know, right? But anyway, so basically, once the conclave starts, it's held in private. They have, so many votes. Now, once they vote, you're going to see they have two different furnaces, and basically, when they take a ballot, and if no pope is elected, they'll put it in one furnace, and if a pope is elected, they'll put it in another furnace.
Hmm.
And so if there's black smoke, you know that there's no pope yet. And if there's white smoke, then you know that it is, the pope has been elected. And all this happening in the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City. And so
Oh,
starting on May 7th, that's what we're going to start seeing. And we're going to start seeing these like daily reports over what color smoke is coming out, unless they like do it really quick. Um, now there are now that being said, just looking at the overall, I know there's 135, 36, but honestly, most people have it narrowed down to about 6 or 12
yeah.
cardinals that they think are going to be the next pope. Um,
Well, that's
and you
why I
can,
was surprised when you said there were so many, because I looked up like who is potentially in the running for Pope, and there was only like 12 names.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's 12 people that basically are like, yeah, you can, maybe one of these 12 kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're just the ones that have the most political might. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
and like, and again, kind of on the lines of like politics, like, I know that they haven't had a European pope in a couple turns, so they're hoping to regain, but then they're also saying, well, maybe not, yada yada yada.
yeah. Well,
So
that's I want to say just real quick when it comes to the two furnaces
yes,
or that's kind of fun.
it is, isn't it?
It's kind of fun.
It's
I
kind of
kind of like
fun.
that. I wouldn't mind driving past, the church and seeing like a billow of smoke and being like, it's blue today, whatever that be. That'd be kind of fun. It's like something to look out for.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I
It
understand
is
that's
fun. I give
probably
you that. It is fun.
I don't I don't know. It's just I'm sure that's, obviously they didn't have social media and all that stuff back in the day, so I'm sure that's just the easiest, quickest way to let people know if progress has been made. But
Yeah,
it's kind of fun, I think we should, maybe we should get into something like that. Get a
that's
get a
right.
chimney and
Yeah,
get
yeah.
some sort of color going.
We're gonna
Yeah,
work on it. We're gonna work on
yeah.
it right now.
I like it. Anyway, sorry.
But yeah, so now anyway, after that, then once they elect a pope, he has to accept. And technically, from what I understand, he has like up to 7 days to accept, but let's be honest, he's probably going to accept immediately.
Well, yeah, if
Um,
he's, I mean, especially if he's one of the Cardinals
mhm.
present, I would assume he's like, yes, immediate.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And he probably will be, at least from the 15th century on.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah. So
that's
anyway,
crazy.
so that's your basic rundown of kind of the election of the Pope. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, I feel like I'm doing it not enough justice, but I guess I don't know. I mean, we're doing
But
enough, right? I mean, again, you're in a
it's insightful. I mean, I've asked you so many questions that are like, no, that's not how it goes. And it's like, well, that's what I've heard. I've literally heard just little spatterings of people saying stuff like that
yeah.
offhanded, and I don't know because I'm not Catholic. So it's very interesting to kind of hear some of that stuff and know exactly how they do it. And it's just, I think it's interesting that you even like went into the topic because, being that this is a Lutheran based podcast, it's
Yeah.
still something though in the world of Christianity.
Yes.
And even though we don't necessarily have a picture of the Pope hanging up in our houses or something, it's still an interesting thing to kind of keep an eye, like just to kind of know what's going on with it.
Yeah.
So
But I also think it's good to keep that in mind. Like, again, this is coming from, as a theologian, I'm pretty good, but but honestly, like as we kind of venture out, like, I mean, look, if you guys look up and some newspaper says, well, this is what canon law says, guess what? I might be wrong. I don't think I am, but I mean, I might be. This is a Lutheran
yeah.
trying to understand Catholic canon law. Um, I'm not going to
And his
pretend I know
sidekick and his
it.
sidekick is a non-denominational guy who's got no idea what's going on. So yeah,
We got
it's tough.
nothing.
Yeah,
Oh man.
we need to get some a Catholic priest or something that we can bring in sometime and be like, hey, let's go through this.
I'll be on the lookout. I'll be on the
Yeah.
lookout.
If
Oh
if
man.
you see any out in the wild,
If
grab
I
them and
see
let's.
any out in the wild, I'll be on the
Yeah,
lookout.
yeah,
Um okay, so I mean again, we're coming up on an hour and we haven't done our saint of the day yet.
yeah.
So I feel like it's time. Are you ready? Are you
I'm
ready? You got
ready.
any other questions? If you got any other questions, we can work on it, but
I don't. I think you've answered all my questions.
okay. I try my best. But all right. All right. Well, I tell you what, if that's the way it's going to be, then here we go. Ready?
Ready.
And now, life and times of the saints. I really need to fix that sound effect. I still don't have an outgoing one. I still,
Yeah, we
I
got to
didn't,
get.
I didn't do it. All right, here we go. Sometimes it's important not to get caught on one side or the other, not to drive off the road in one direction or off the cliff in the other. Pyle had a unique name. Well, unique to us, but he stayed the course. He didn't go off the rails, if you will. That isn't to say he never lost his temper or that he never did anything rash, but in the end, it was always things that were needed. There was a time when Pyle wasn't around, and maybe it felt like things were going off the rails. But while there was a time when Pyle was not, there wasn't a time when Jesus was not. That is the true path, and Pyle knew it. Pyle picks up where last week we left off. Considered one of the popes of the early days, but he didn't get to stay that way. At least not always. While the path was while the path was straight and he knew not to go to the right or the left, the reality is that it was a bumpy path filled with ups and downs. In his early life, even at the age of 27, he was involved in a fight, you might say, an argument of sorts with a man who argued that there was a time when he was not. The man that Pyle argued against had gone into a ditch and couldn't get out. He forgot that he shouldn't be turning to the left or to the right. No, this man did what was wrong, and Pyle was there to stop him, or at least at 27, he was part of a group that would stop him. But some people refused to believe they are wrong sometimes. So the man who believed that there was a time when he was not dug in. The one argument would end up defining Pyle's life. He worked underneath a man of importance in a time when it was important to know the path, to know the way, to know where to turn, but more importantly, to know where not to turn. Eventually, the man he worked for fell ill. It wasn't that he fell off the cliff, he just fell ill. When this man of importance, named Alex for short, finally died, they chose Pyle to fill his shoes. Pyle couldn't have been more than 30 years old, and yet there he was in a place where they called him a patriarch or a father figure for short, or maybe even Papa. With so many people counting on him, Pyle focused on the straight path. Things got in the way. One king wanted him one way, the other king wanted him another, but neither was right. It wasn't that there were 2 or 3 kings, but one king, at least one at a time, each pushing in their own direction, their own agenda. The kings, at least these kings, were not eternal. They were mortal men, and not 3 immortal men, but simply one mortal man at a time. But it took its toll. Pyle was exiled from his home 5 times for a total of 17 years. Sometimes the road is bumpy indeed. And yet all of this makes the journey just that much more. Eventually, Pyle became friends with Tony and even wrote about him. In fact, from a historical standpoint, Tony is mainly known to us because of Pyle. And while Pyle is known for so much, it ultimately is something that he didn't write, something written years later that takes his name, something that many of us know. It takes its name because years later, someone wrote this in such a way that it reminded them of how Pyle used to write. Always keeping the path straight, never going off the edge. Pyle, as a name, never did take off. So nearly 100 years after his death, when St. Gregory gave him the name of Pyle, or as we might say it, pillar, Athanasius really didn't ever take off as Pyle. But that's who we're talking about. Saint Athanasius, the man known for holding straight to the path and not going to the right or to the left. The one holding the straight path and understanding that when it comes to our Heavenly Father, we do not worship 3 gods, but one God. Not 3 eternals, but one eternal. And yet, there is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The longest creed in our church carries this man's name, and yet he didn't write it. Written some 100+ years after his death, it bears his name because it's written in the very style that Athanasius spoke and wrote in. All right. Oh, by the way, Tony, just as a side note here, as I kind of that's kind of the end there, but like Tony is actually Saint Anthony the Great. Just so you know.
Oh, okay.
Saint Anthony the Great is the guy who's credited with starting the very first monastery.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And because people want, but whenever Athanasius was put into exile, he ran out into the desert, and there he found Saint Anthony, who taught him how to live in the desert. So,
oh wow,
fascinating stuff.
Very fascinating.
And he was in Alexandria, by the way.
In Alexandria.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I'm trying, as you're telling this story, I'm actually trying to look up who you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking up Saint Pile, and nothing's coming up. And then I'm like, Saint Pill, and nothing. And then you have a good reveal at the end.
Well, I'm
Uh,
trying. I'm trying to get better at the reveal at the end. I really am.
yeah, it's good. It's good.
I don't have it perfect, but yeah, no. So Saint Gregory the Great called him the pillar of the church, and so I said, okay, what's a
Wow,
name that stands for
that,
pillar?
that's
And
quite a name or quite a description.
and so I looked up a name that meant pillar, and so
Yeah.
pile is the best I could do. So anyway, but yeah, so Athanasius was at the Council of Nicaea in 325,
Oh,
where they
okay.
fought against Arius. And Arius's
Right.
big catchphrase was, "There was a time when he was not," and he was speaking about Jesus.
Yeah.
And again, that whole council, they said, no, Jesus is God and Jesus is eternal. And so, so again, that's kind of, again, if you go back and re-listen to it, you'll find that I threw little things in there all over the place. Again, I tried
Yeah.
my best. I'm
You
trying to
did
be
great. Yeah.
crafty. I'm not
Hey, you're
perfect, but
doing
I'm trying to be
great.
crafty. So by the
Yeah.
way, Saint Athanasius Day is May 2nd.
Ooh,
Yeah, May 2nd. So
coming
that's
up.
coming up on Friday. I didn't get a chance to look up the food and drink items, so I'm afraid we're gonna have to hold the recipe off for right now. I feel a little
Listen,
bad about that, but I mean, what are you gonna do?
I mean, I think a lot of people want to know, you know.
Well, I
Saint,
mean, maybe why? Okay, so I can I'll see what I can do while we while while we try to look at whatever comes next. Oh, that's right. It's almost time. It's almost time. Do you have any questions? By the way,
it's
like because we did like the whole saint days and everything, like what questions do you have about good old Saint Athanasius?
oh well. So
That's right. I
because
called
you
you
got
out.
into you did call me out. Because you said the other saint was the one who taught him how to live off the land.
Yes.
Am I jumbling up? Okay. So
Yeah. No,
I'm just
he
I'm
did.
when when someone describes somebody as the pillar of the church, that's a huge compliment. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, I mean, that's a huge monumental thing. Um, and he started when he was 30. You said,
So
like,
like the Council of Nicaea took place when it started when he was 27.
oh man,
And
okay,
he was there. Now he wasn't necessarily a man of influence there. Like he wasn't like the big dog kind of thing. He
but
he was,
yeah,
but he was there. He was there as kind of an underling of a man by the name of Alexander, which is funny because Alexander was at that time the bishop in Alexandria.
ah,
So I called him Alex
coincident,
in the thing, but it's like Alex of
yeah,
Alexandria. So yeah.
yeah, that's that's. I bet that was a huge uh influence on him, though. I mean, that had to be huge to be there, and even if he wasn't someone sitting up and talking, but that means he was probably someone who was just sitting and listening to everything they were saying. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
to be that young compared to all these other people. I mean, I don't know what the common age amongst all those people were. Um, if they were way, way older than him or what, but I mean, that had to be a huge thing for him.
Oh yeah.
I mean, being a we need we've done a episode where we talked about the origins of the Nicene Creed,
Yes.
and I need to find that episode because I need to re-listen to it because I remember some big parts about it, but I'm like I need to go through and re-listen to that just so I can remember every detail of what we talked about. But I'm trying to. I don't know if I have a specific question about him. I need
So,
to.
and that's okay. It's okay. So I got a chance. I got a chance to look some stuff up. I did it really quick, and I was trying to talk to you at the same time. So if I cut out, I'm sorry. Um, so here's the thing: the meal is Egyptian,
Nice.
um, and it's a good one. So they had a couple different options, and it wasn't a big saintly meal. It was because again they only do one of those a month. So So it was more just a suggestion. But I'll be honest, I think you can make this into a meal, and that is
Yeah.
falafel.
Ooh.
Oh man, I love falafel.
Yeah.
Have you
I
ever
don't know if I've ever
you
had authentic
you
falafel.
you need to eat some good old falafel. Um,
Yeah.
it's delicious. I mean,
I'm
I
sure I'd
really
love
mean
it.
that. It's really good. So yes, falafel is apparently it has some of its origins in ancient Egypt. They make in the cookbook I have, they made a version of it with believe it or not with fava beans, as
Ooh.
opposed to garbanzo beans. So anyway, for what
That
it's
sounds
worth,
good.
that's kind of what their suggestion. And then they do have a cocktail, and that's
Ooh.
Contra Mundum.
Hmm.
1.5 ounce of bourbon, 1.5 ounce of lime juice, half ounce of grenadine, 1 lime slice. Put it all in a shaker and shake. I mean, not the lime slice. Looks like it goes into a cocktail or martini glass. So there you go.
Wow.
There you go. That's the drink for Saint Athanasius.
Wow.
Yeah, right. If
This is
you're
such a
into that
world.
thing, you don't have to, but if you're into that thing, if you're thinking to yourself, boy, I wish I had a cocktail to go with my falafel.
Yeah, I was
There
just
you
gonna
go.
say, I wonder how those match together.
I don't think they do.
I, it's like I think a red wine fits the falafel really well, you know. Or,
Yeah.
yeah.
But anyway, so there you go. And I'll try to I might have to be better at that, getting the saintly meal stuff. But anyway, there you go. So there you have it. So you can do falafel with red wine or contramundum. Yeah. Oh,
Contramundum.
there you go.
What a drink. Yeah.
You betcha. All right. I think that means we're an hour and 11 minutes in, but I think it's
I
time
know.
for
For
church
church
chatter.
chatter.
I really need to get the soundbite for that. I
Yeah, we got
really
to get
do.
because I mean I know if I feel like I'm with you, then I know it's probably not with you on your end. So I don't know,
We'll get there.
but yeah,
We'll get there. But anyway, so just kind of highlighting some things that are going on here around our church and about your church and our Savior. Things going on in my church. We have Confirmation Sunday coming up. We have 2 confirmands that are going to be confirmed, so pretty awesome on that front. We got their Night of Witness coming in on Friday, and that is where we're going to ask them questions that has some historical origins with confirmation. So we're looking forward to that. I know Mother's Day is coming up. That's going to be their first communion for the confirmands, and also we're going to hand out flowers. So that'll be super nice. And of course, I got a wedding coming up. I mean,
yes, you do.
yeah, like 17, 18 days.
I
Like
know.
I got a wedding coming up. That
It's
just
people.
blows
I
my
mean,
mind.
hey, if there's it's getting down to the wire now to where
Right?
like got to make sure things are ordered.
I know.
so
I know.
so things are here on time.
That's right. That's right. I have not done much of that, and I'll be honest, I'm a complete guy. So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Well, it's exciting. I'm excited for it. It's gonna be good.
heck yeah, I'm excited for it. It's going to be a good time. So anyway, so that's what's going on in my neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Looking forward to summer, of course. Things are slowing down. Obviously, with confirmation out, my evenings, free up a little bit, but I'll still have my Wednesday night service. So anyway, so yeah, that's what's going on in my neck of the woods. What's happening over at Our Savior?
Well, the big news I would say that I know some people who listen to the podcast are kind of wanting to know, but we've had a call out for quite a while now, and this week we got confirmed that they're returning it, so they won't be coming. So, it's tough. I think this is the first time though that when they announce it at the beginning of a service. You can definitely feel quite a like the life in the room kind of leaves. You can tell how disappointed everybody is. This time around, I mean, I think people, it's like we were kind of just like, all right, it didn't seem like it didn't seem as harsh, which I don't know if
Yeah.
that's a good thing or bad thing, but we're kind of like, it had been out for a while, so we were kind
Yeah.
of not,
Yeah, I knew
we're
you
kind
guys
of
waited for a
assuming.
long time. I think we even talked about that last week.
Yeah, it was quite a while. So I think we kind of got to the point where we got really hopeful, and then we kind of were like, well, I think it's probably a no. And so, yeah, but we're they're pushing forward, and they're gonna,
Yeah.
they're already jumping back in because they want to get going with it. So, so that's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's mostly what we have going on. I'm already starting to kind of gear up for VBS stuff and
Oh,
starting to
yeah.
prepare for that. And yeah, we don't, I don't, to be honest, I don't really know, just because since we don't have a head pastor, I don't know what the status of our uh, uh co- gosh darn it, the word is leaving me all of a sudden.
Confirmation?
A confirmation.
Yeah.
I don't really know what the status is on that, if we have anybody really go like graduating from that or not,
Yeah.
if that's the right term. And so I don't really know. And I will say the one thing, I am a little disappointed
Yeah.
because, as you know, Pastor Kevin has that song, Christ Confirms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I have to say I am a little disappointed I'm not playing it this year.
Oh.
I haven't introduced it to this church,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just it's a fun song.
Yeah, it
I don't
is.
know if I assume most people kind of know that one, but it's a fun one, and I'm like, we're not doing it this year, just because I haven't been told anything about like preparing for
Yeah.
a service with that, so
Yeah.
I haven't thrown it in. But yeah, but that's just it's just a fun one, and I do love the fact that there's like these songs that only certain, like you guys have that song, and if you go to most other churches, they probably don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But that's kind of fun. It's fun that there's something unique there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, but that's pretty much everything going on this neck of the woods. We're just gearing up for summer, so
Yep. Well, all right. Well, it sounds good to me. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I'm sorry to hear that the guy returned the call. I know that kind of is a bummer. I know you guys waited forever, so maybe it wasn't as big of a blow, but at the same time,
yeah,
it still
I
hurts
think
a little
it.
bit.
Yeah, I think it's just that there was enough time that people kind of accepted that it was, probably 99% going to be a no, and
Yeah.
so it wasn't like anybody was really that shocked when we got the no. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
unfortunately,
yep.
yeah, but we'll see where things go after this.
Yeah,
so.
we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right. Anything else going on over that way?
No, we're
Oh,
just
okay.
that's pretty much it.
That's it. Well, all right then. I think that's all the time that we have. We're almost at an hour and 20 minutes. We
This
pushed
is a
the
long one.
limit. We pushed the limits of what we could do. So
Yeah.
anyway. So all right. Well, that's all the time that we have for today's episode. I'm just gonna say that because like instead of like tonight, because yeah, I mean like I'm looking at the clock, it's like it's 10:30. So
Right.
it's late at night.
For
But
us,
you might be listening to this in the morning. I don't know. So anyway.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, anyway, thanks for listening. God's peace to all of you. Bye.
Bye.